The following is a podcast where expert practitioners and thought leaders share their insights and advice. A big thank you to all of you out there, our listeners. If you have any feedback or if you have a topic you'd like to hear about on this podcast, drop me an email at insights@securitycompass.com.
Us and IBM Security, as well as every other major cybersecurity vendor on the market, spends an inordinate amount of resources building, maintaining, and supporting integrations with a lot of different tools. There's just a lot of proliferation in the cybersecurity industry, a lot of different competing standards, a lot of tools that don't implement standards, and as a result, the interchange of data between tools has a very high level of friction, and we actually have data that shows that the average enterprise is spending as much energy and manpower integrating the tools in their SOC as they are doing actual defense using those tools.
You're listening to the Balancing Act podcast from Security Compass, your guide to going fast while staying safe in today's digital world. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast of the Balancing Act from Security Compass. I'm your host, Altaz Valani. Today's conversation is a really interesting one. In my discussions with folks in the industry and in standards working groups, I find that many times organizations are struggling when it comes to security. And part of the problem is we've got tool sprawl, there's a lack of standards, we're not able to bring things together in a manner that essentially provides us with insights from all of these tools that we're using in a way that helps decision makers. And based on what I'm seeing, I thought it made sense to have a conversation with Jason Keirstead. Jason is from IBM Security, and he's also the co-chair of Open Cybersecurity Alliance. Jason, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks, Altaz. It's great to be here.
So, Jason, why don't we sort of kick this off? Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up sort of leading OCA and kind of what your journey was like?
Yeah, certainly. So my role at IBM Security in the CTO office, I help lead some of our technology direction. And about 3 years ago, we were investing in some of our next generation platform. And as we were doing that, as we normally do, we were working with a lot of our business partners on how they could integrate with our products. And, as we were working with some of these partners, it became increasingly clear that, us and IBM Security, as well as every other major cybersecurity vendor on the market, spends an inordinate amount of resources building, maintaining, and supporting integrations with a lot of different tools. And our clients have to deal with this challenge as well. As you mentioned, there's just a lot of proliferation in the cybersecurity industry, a lot of different competing standards, a lot of tools that don't implement standards. And as a result, the interchange of data between tools has a very high level of friction. And we actually have data that shows that the average enterprise is spending as much energy and manpower integrating the tools in their SOC as they are doing actual defense using those tools, because it's so difficult to send the information and extract the valuable insights. So essentially, myself and some others in the space decided that we should try to come together and create, promote open standards and interoperability among the cybersecurity tool chains, because there's a lot of different standards that exist today, from OASIS, from the IETF, from ONUG, groups like the Open Group. But the challenge that we saw is that, and I've got a lot of theories for why this is, by the way, but in the cybersecurity industry, these standards, they don't actually tend to work in practice. They're not implemented fully. Even when folks say they support them, they don't interoperate seamlessly. So customers don't get a lot of value out of these things. And we said, what if there was an organization whose goal and charter was solely to increase interoperability by adopting these standards? And we would do it based on open source and open source principles. So it wasn't just a bunch of people sitting in a back room writing up a whole bunch of specifications and then expecting them to get implemented. It would actually be about writing open source code and libraries to enable the interoperability in the first place, and really lower the bar for vendors and clients to implement these interoperability procedures and make the standards work. And that's really what led to the founding of the Open Cybersecurity Alliance. And the mission is really all about making standards actually work using open source software.
That's interesting. So we've got a sense of the mission of the OCA, and you've had a really interesting journey to lead you to that. It came out of some pain that you were seeing, and you've stepped up and you're doing something about this. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And I'm just wondering, can you talk a little bit about the different work streams within the OCA? What are some of the problems that you're tackling?
Yeah, so the OCA, it's grown from its original founding. When we originally founded it, there were basically 2 open source projects, and there are now 4 different open source projects and multiple working groups as well, all under the OCA umbrella. So in terms of projects, we have the Stick Shifter project, which was one of the original launch projects. And what it does is it allows bi-directional translation to and from the Sticks cybersecurity data model from OASIS. And what that then gives you is, by helping products and consumers translate data to and from a common data model, in this case Sticks 2, you can get all the different products to start to speak the same language. And the Stick Shifter has a whole bunch of different plugin modules to do this bidirectional translation. There's a little over 30 that exist today. When we started, there was only a handful, and now we're up to over 30. So it's growing quite nicely. The second major project that we have is called Kestrel. Kestrel builds on top of Stick Shifter and allows folks to hunt for threats across many different products using a unified threat hunting language. So Stick Shifter is more about the data model translation. Kestrel then adds a whole language on top of it and a runtime based on Jupyter notebooks to let you go and hunt for threats across all of the different 30 plus products that Stick Shifter supports. And the third major project that we have that started in Q4 last year is called PACE. And what it is about is an effort to create a reference implementation for posture assessment. So PACE stands for Posture, Attribute, Collection, and Enumeration. And it's all about connecting to endpoints, getting their posture. When I say posture, I mean what software is installed, what vulnerabilities exist, what software bills and materials constitute that software, gathering that up and collecting that into a central location that can then be interrogated and used in various cybersecurity applications. So there's work in this space that happened in the IETF, but there was never any reference implementation created for all of the output of this IETF working group. And PACE is essentially an effort to make some of those IETF standards a reality with an open source implementation.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
no, no just really quickly. So those are three of the major projects. The fourth project is the ontology project, which is about creating a unified cybersecurity ontology. That one's a little bit more esoteric, but it is an important foundational building block for a lot of things we might want to do in the future. Because again, if folks are speaking different languages with different data models, it becomes really hard to exchange information. And then the two major working groups we have, and the difference between a project and a working group is a working group doesn't yet have any kind of code. It's a group of like-minded individuals focused on a problem set that may turn into a project later on. One is around indicators of behavior. So there was a significant subset of the community who wanted to focus on how can we model and share indicators of behavior using the STIX2 2.1 data format. And this becomes more important as folks try to move beyond just indicators of compromise and try to up-level their defenses, actually sharing the ways that threat actors go and perpetuate their attacks. And the second working group is around zero trust, and how can we use some of the OCA reference architectures and projects to enable a zero trust approach to cybersecurity. So those are kind of the six major things that we have going on at the OCA right now. And it's an open community with a well-defined governance process to spin up new working groups and projects. So occasionally, all of these different efforts were brought by various members of the OCA and said, I want to spin up a working group for X. And if the governing board decided there was enough critical mass, then we will then do that under the OCA umbrella. And the benefits of doing it under the OCA is, you get that well-defined governance structure that OASIS has. So everybody participating knows that their intellectual properties being protected, and it's not going to be a concern with, patent trolls and things like that.
Hmm. It's interesting. You mentioned OASIS and the governance structure. It looks like it's quite extensive. You've got a lot of pretty sizable projects on the go right now. Do you collaborate with other communities like the Linux Foundation, the Open Group, CNCF, any of these other groups?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'd say yes and no. We definitely are open to collaboration with any and all groups. A lot of the work that happens in OCA, just because of the nature of who's coming from where, is fairly closely tied to other work that's happening at OASIS. So a lot of the work that, a lot of the folks have backgrounds in the STIX2 community from OASIS and the Open C2 community from OASIS and the Cacao community from OASIS. But there are also, for example, I mentioned PACE, that it actually has a lot of ties to IETF working groups. We haven't had any real liaisons yet with the Open group, but as I said, there's nothing preventing it. It just hasn't happened yet. In terms of OpenSSF, we again don't have any kind of direct liaison relationship, but there is some alignment starting to happen around, so I mentioned software bill of materials with respect to the PACE project. Obviously, OpenSSF is very involved in the software bill of materials space with respect to SPDX, as well as some of the tooling that's being developed under the OpenSSF umbrella. So there might be a future linkage there between those two groups. We'll see.
Yeah, so there could be this sort of convergence of, even though it is currently coming from different perspectives, eventually this stuff there may be points of intersection with the efforts that are taking place. It's really interesting to hear your thoughts on how this could evolve. Many times when we talk about standards, open source, The question really comes down to the operational side of this. We can talk about things at an abstract level, and it sounds great, but operationally, maybe it's much more difficult. Can you talk a little bit, Jason, about organizations that have been able to adopt the work that is being produced by OCA?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to be completely honest. And as with any kind of journey like this, it has been a little bit of a slog. So OCA has been around for almost 3 years now, I believe, if I'm counting correctly. And we made the excellent choice to start a brand new foundation just at the beginning of a worldwide pandemic. And that certainly didn't help matters with during COVID. A lot of firms were trying to be more cautious with what they were doing, et cetera, et cetera. But it has been very encouraging, I'd say, over the past 12 months, where we've started to get a lot more momentum around our projects, a lot of interest. So things, I think with efforts like this, it's like you just kind of keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, and eventually you'll start to build some momentum and build some steam. And that's what we're starting to see now. So we are starting to see, customers, not just my customers, but lots of different clients starting to adopt these technologies and are very interested in them. I don't want to go into any details specifically, but we know of someone who's starting investigating using Kestrel for a portable threat hunting program, so that they can go and when they're doing incident response at all kinds of different locations, if you can kind of imagine the metaphor of the people dropping in, the SEAL Team 6 dropping in from the helicopter, right?
Mm-hmm.
They come in, they're doing incident response, and who knows what technology they're going to encounter at that client site, right?
Yeah.
And that's where having something like this that can go and connect to and let them bring their hunt books. We call them hunt books. These structured threat hunts that work across all the different tools. To be able to write a bunch of hunt books and create them and then bring them to different countries, different companies, different organizations, and have them work across, it's really attractive to them. So that that's kind of it's actually a different use case than the interoperability use case, but you can kind of see how there's many different benefits to having common data models and being able to interoperate, because it helps you do incident response more. It helps communities share information about threat actors more effectively. It's I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I talk to a lot of different clients in my day job. And one of the most frustrating things to me, Altaz, is that from my viewpoint, we are all fighting the same battles all the time. But often clients don't know that others are fighting the same battle. They think they're doing it, and they either think they're the only ones trying to build this defense, or because there isn't any kind of an open community with information being shared or ability to share that information effectively, they're having to go it alone. And I see it time and time and time again, where we'll have we'll be going and talking with clients, and I know for a fact that there's another client that's trying to do this exact same, solve for this exact same detection or detect this exact same threat actor that this customer is trying to do. And wouldn't it be great if we were able to collaborate more effectively, right? Because industry wide, we are burning billions and billions and billions of dollars that don't need to be burnt. If you get my drift.
Yeah, yeah. And this in the context of not having enough people to conduct all of this work from a security
Exactly.
standpoint. So it just sort of compounds the problem, right? I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, we,
Exactly. It's like, we hear nonstop about the cybersecurity skill shortage, which is real,
mhm,
right? But it is a real problem. But meanwhile, the folks that the skills that we do have, we're not leveraging them effectively because they're being bifurcated across all of these different silos and no one is talking to each other.
yeah, yeah. And therein lies the standardization and the ability to then codify a lot of the common elements, thereby freeing people up to go in and focus on edge cases and things like that, which are more emergent. And then you sort of create this cycle of detection, and then you come back, you remediate it. And you know, it's really interesting what you were just talking about. And it kind of, you know, as you were talking, I was sitting there thinking, where is OCA headed in the future? Can you talk a little bit? You don't need to disclose everything, Jason, but you kind of alluded to it a little bit. But you know, where do you kind of see OCA going in the future? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so we're still just at the beginning phases of this. So it's kind of hard to say where do you see OCA going in the future because I mean, I'm still feel like we're struggling with
Hmm.
today's challenge. So, um I think if we can get decent adoption of some of these tools so that um we can up level the industry and have folks, like you say, focusing on edge cases and collaborating around the common elements a lot more effectively, then what we would like to be able to achieve with the OCA at some point, and we're quite a ways away from this, but we would like to be able to get to the point where I don't want to say a certification because that sounds very heavyweight. But imagine a world where you're going to buy a cybersecurity tool, be it a SIM platform, SOAR platform, threat intelligence, XDR, whatever new buzzword we decide to invent next year in
Hmm.
this crazy, crazy industry. Um, Imagine if you're going to procure that tool and you say, I want to know if this tool is going to work with my already existing investments. And oh, because I see that it has OCA on the box, I know that it's going to work with my other existing investments. That's where I would like to get someday. Not necessarily a certification, because to me that's very heavyweight, but at least some kind of an attestation where people can say, yes, we are consuming that tool chain, so you know that our stuff is going to work with this other stuff, right? And you're not going to have to invest the same amount in people as you are in licensing this product just to make it work.
Yeah, that's really interesting and very inspiring. You know, maybe when people are listening to this podcast, Jason, they might want to jump in and get involved. Can you talk a little bit? How can people get in touch with you, get involved with the work streams, the projects at OCA? How does that all work?
Yeah, so there's a number of different ways that you can get involved, and it kind of depends on where in the industry you're coming from. So if you're coming at this from a customer perspective, um, one of the most powerful tools in your tool chain is your wallet and your ability to influence the RFPs, right? So make sure that your vendors understand that support for standards is important to you. Make sure that they understand that, when, it's going to be a factor in procurement, whether or not they actually support standards or if they're just paying lip service to them. Because, part of what we're trying to do in the OCA is enable and enhance these existing standards and making them work. Um, if you're if you're either a developer or someone who creates products, or if you're a mature customer who builds your own integrations, that's where we would love to help you, have you come and contribute to these projects or consume some of these projects. So again, we're providing all of these projects already exist. And if you're a vendor, cybersecurity vendor, there is absolutely nothing, and they're all licensed with very liberal, business-friendly Apache licenses, I should say. And there's nothing stopping you from integrating Kestrel or Stick Shifter or one of these other projects into your product, and all of a sudden you will immediately get the advantage of these 30 plus and constantly growing data connections. And you no longer have to invest all of the manpower to build all of those 30 plus integrations. This is the whole thing we're trying to get to, is if we can get more folks consuming these projects, then instead of us all building our own integrations all the time. So another way I describe this, Altaz, I missed it earlier, but if you imagine, so I'm with IBM Security. IBM Security, imagine how many partners that we integrate with across our portfolio of products. Let's just say it's 500, right? So we have 500 different integrations. Now take, say, Cisco. How many do you think Cisco has? They probably have another 500 integrations. Then take, a Splunk. How many apps are in the Splunk App Store? How many integrations do they have? Well, there's another, 700 or 800. Take all of these things, add them up across the industry. You've got tens of thousands of integrations, all of which have to be built, maintained, and supported throughout time, right? If instead of everybody building their own one-off integrations to all of these different products, what if we all just built the one integration with the Stick Shifter fabric or the Kestrel fabric, and then everybody could use it, right? We would save so much money across the industry, and all of that resource could then be redirected to, as you say, I wouldn't necessarily say edge cases, it's actual business problems, right? Because in building cybersecurity integrations is not moving the needle on combating threat actors. It's just something you have to do, right? Mm-hmm. Because the industry is so bifurcated. It's like a sunk cost. It's not actually improving your value to your customer. It's not helping us defend against the adversary. It's just the cost of doing business. And across the industry, we are all incurring this cost because we're not working together, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This has just been an amazing conversation, and we could just go on, I think, on this. Just to our listeners, you've been listening to a discussion we're having with Jason Keirstead. We're grateful, Jason, for your time today, just to share your insights with all of us. We'd love to have you back again at some point in the future if you're open to it. Thank you as well to all our listeners for taking the time to listen in. Give us your thoughts, your feedback. Our Twitter handle is @SecurityCompass, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn. With that, I wish you all a safe and wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
The thoughts and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect those of their organization.